Okay, we'll get going. It's 12:04 and it's November 7. Welcome, everyone. This is actually exciting because it's our last seminar of our Ease of Research series, which we started this year. And those of you who have joined us, and this is a before, we thank you. And you know that this is available on our website. And also, if you Google Ease of Research, our seminars come up. So it's quite easy to find them. Um, we are ending today with an absolutely wonderful topic, which is very relevant when we are talking in this present environment of diversification of our research portfolios. And we are really thankful for our guests today and our speakers, Angie Wright uh, and Hazel Kim. She's joined by Hazel, and then Ashley. You are there as well as a part of the team. So we will have uh, we will hear from diverse points of the team. But let me introduce Angie to you. Angie is the Executive Director for the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations. And this is the first time we have somebody from that office here to meet with, to answer your questions and to present to you directly, although we have been in conversation with Angie for a while now. Angie, what worried me is I know you have a bachelor's of science in history and a master's in experimental psychology, comparative behavioral neuroscience. That got me worried. I worry when we meet what you think about my psychology now, as you have that master's in that. And then you have master's of education in educational leadership. Angie
Yes.
has worked for 25 years in education. She has worked in other wonderful institutions like Duke, Wake County Public School System. And she started here in the business school first, and then as the chief development officer for the Office of Nursing. And at this time, we have to understand that Angie is the executive director of the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relationship, which sits at the level of the Emory University. So we are really thankful for your time, Angie, because we do understand that you have a big portfolio under you. And as we go on, I will request you to introduce other members of your team so that people know what their roles are, and we'll go from there. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. We appreciate the opportunity, and it has been such a pleasure since coming into this role to get to know Dr. Lama and Dr. Searles and learn more about all the exciting work that they're leading and what a wonderful resource they are for the School of Medicine. So we will jump right in and get started. And at about the midpoint of the presentation, I will turn things over to my colleague Hazel Kim, who has just recently been promoted to Senior Managing Director for our Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations. And she is going to be a primary point of contact for the School of Medicine. So those of you who don't know Hazel, you will get to know her very well, hopefully in the coming days and weeks and months ahead. Well, just to jump right in and get you all oriented to the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations, we find quite often that many of our colleagues across campus are very familiar with research administration services, but not always maybe necessarily so familiar with our office. We are a central-based unit, and we are part of the Advancement and Alumni Engagement team. We work across the entirety of Emory, so we support both the university side as well as the healthcare side. Our work spans from just developing collaborations with corporations and foundations, from things like student internships, student experiential learning opportunities, to sponsored research agreements, to very large transformational philanthropic investments, all with the goal to find where there are mutual synergies and impact that are going to be mutually beneficial for both Emory as an organization as well as the organizations that we're collaborating with. Next slide. Just to share a little bit about our structure, I did mention that we are a central based unit. We work across the entirety of Emory. We are a small, growing team, and the individual development officers that work within the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations have a bit of a bifurcated structure. On one side, we have individual development officers who are assigned to develop relationships with external partners. So we each have a portfolio of both corporations and foundations that we work with to develop Emory's overall relationship with those organizations, to get to know their priorities, to just have strong relationships so that they think of Emory and that we can go to each other as trusted partners. So our team has first that responsibility as being really liaisons outside the institution to corporations and foundations. Similarly, our team is assigned across the Emory ecosystem to support specific schools, units, and areas and departments in the case of the healthcare side. So as I referenced, as we jumped in today's conversation, Hazel Kim, who you're going to be hearing from a little bit later on, is assigned specifically to work with the School of Medicine and healthcare programs. So Hazel has a great deal of expertise in this area, and you're going to get to hear from her today about ways in which she can partner and be a support for all of you. Some of the partners that we work with across the Emory ecosystem, and you can see, I won't read off the entirety of the list. We work with the academic side. We certainly work with university leaders. I'm working right now on a letter that we need from President Sears for an application that's going in for a university colleague. We work with the Office of Sponsored Programs. We have a quite strong working relationship with Research Administration Services, Office of Sponsored Programs, research grants and contracts. So if you need support working through the RAS side, we have contacts across the board there, and they have some similar structures like we do in corporate and foundation relations. And so we know who the right people are to connect to provide support for School of Medicine. We work with the Office of Technology Transfer, so we know that certainly comes up quite often for School of Medicine's questions that faculty have. And so again, we've got good, strong working relationships with the Office of Technology Transfer, where there are intersections between the work that we do and the office that they support in OTT. Also, our Office of Faculty Development, Office of Research Development, and then, of course, program staff across the university. I wanted to call out two partners from our Advancement Alumni Engagement Division. And these colleagues work most directly on individual giving, but they're also really close partners with us as well as we work with corporations and foundations. In particular, they're working with grateful patients, alumni, and healthcare friends. And I wanted to invite each of them to come off mute and introduce themselves and share a little bit about the areas that they work with. So I'll start with Ashley Michaud.
Thanks, Angie. Good to see everybody. Yes, I manage a team of frontline fundraisers who primarily work with faculty to identify and call on patients who might be grateful and excited to engage with us outside of the clinic, including discussions around philanthropy. So please feel free to reach out if we can ever be of any assistance. Thanks.
And Tom Lawley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Ashley's counterpart on the alumni side, so I work closely with the resident and fellow alumni within the different departments, but then also the School of Medicine alumni, those who receive their MD degree. We work together to identify philanthropic opportunities to support the departments and the divisions, again, through fellowships, residency opportunities, and work closely with our colleagues across the board to build a culture of trust, a culture of philanthropy within these different departments, divisions, and we look forward to partnering with you all as well.
So
Thank
actually,
you, Tom.
Tom, can we take 1 second here? And
Sure.
actually, you probably work with quite a few people in our department of medicine. Is that right? Or is it like others in your group who work with the different divisions?
I'm sorry, Dr. Lama, were you speaking to me or to Tom?
No, to you, Ashley.
Oh, okay, yes, I do. As I said, I manage a team of fundraisers, so there are, some other individuals assigned to the different divisions within the Department of Medicine. But Tom and I both meet with Dr. Del Rio regularly, and so yes, that really quite a wide variety of the departments and divisions throughout the school with clinical representation.
What would you advise one of our faculty members who, and a lot of those are our clinical colleagues who have patients who are grateful patients who, during the conversation, bring up something like, Doctor, what can I do to help? Or, what do you advise our faculty? How do they find the person they should be contacting?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of the Department of Medicine, I'm sort of, lead point on that. So I'm happy to facilitate anybody's, thoughts around that. But several of us try to proactively meet with our faculty regarding how to identify patients who might be grateful in this way and who may be interested in making a philanthropic investment. So really, we just meet one-on-one to have those discussions to hear feedback about who they may suspect may be interested in investing with us this way. We also have a colleague who assists us with training, with identifying who may be grateful in this type of way. So a lot of times when we meet with faculty, they say, "Oh, I don't pay attention to." Someone's wealth. And that's not actually what we're looking for. We're looking for particular gratefulness for their experience as a patient and, positivity around Emory as a whole. So, again, feel free to contact me. And maybe, yeah, my contact information is here. Again, Ashley Michaud. And if there's other fundraisers that I work with that work more specifically in a certain service line or division within the department, I'm happy to make that introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, Tom.
All right. Next slide, please. Our office, I think, in recent months has been a bit more visible in terms, I think, of interest from faculty and exploring other opportunities for funding. I think from our perspective in corporate and foundation relations, we have always noted the value in diverse portfolios. And in particular, in these changing times that we're experiencing right now, we feel that the need for diverse research portfolios and funding portfolios couldn't be any more important. We wanted to share a little bit about what we have seen in terms of the trends in funding from both on, and this is more from an advancement and alumni engagement side, more philanthropic. While we see over about the last 30 years, the investment from corporations has remained relatively stable. But the amount that is coming from individuals has been on the decline. We are seeing more around conversations and encouraging philanthropy in the earlier generations. But where we do see an increase, and this is something exciting from our perspective, but I think also speaks a lot for the changes that we're seeing in philanthropy, is that there's an increasing investment from foundations. So you see that it has almost doubled, little more than doubled in the last 30 years, while on the corporations and bequests, that's remained relatively stable. Individuals are decreasing, but foundations are on the increase. Some of the pressures of the moment that we all recognize that Emory as an institution is facing, individual faculty have been facing in recent months are canceled grants, programs, many long-standing programs that had been consistently counted on year over year as being funding opportunities at the federal level are now being defunded. There are challenges around indirect cost rates. Those are shrinking, and it's creating increasing pressures in thinking about where to explore, where to go to make up for those gaps in research dollars. While all of that is occurring, we do want to give voice to some of the same unpredictability that we're experiencing in higher education. I would say education generally. Our colleagues on the corporate and the foundation side are experiencing similar challenges. Corporate profits are being impacted, and that impacts the amount that they may be able to have to partner with and invest in research, collaboration, and sponsored programs. In terms of foundations, foundations are also facing an unpredictable future. And we are finding in many instances, while it has been oftentimes the case with corporations, that they regularly revisit what their priorities are and what they're going to choose to invest their resources in. For foundations, they have charters under which they're established, and they oftentimes have a fairly expected routine set of priorities that they're going to support and the ways in which that support is going to be provided. We're finding, particularly in the last 6 months, that many foundations who had very well established programs and grant opportunities through which they would award funding, that they are putting those on pause and or revisiting them. So we just invite everyone to recognize some of the challenges we're experiencing as a sector, that some of the same challenges are taking place on both the corporate and the foundation side. So again, just coming back to, and I know Dr. Lama led with us today, talking about the importance of a diverse portfolio. That's always something from our perspective that we see as great value. As Dr. Lama shared when she was introducing me, I have spent 25 years in education. I have written lots of federal grants, and I've worked on the corporate and the foundation side as well. And I think what we see in education generally, what we see here in Emory as an institution, oftentimes there is the tendency to go towards the federal for a number of reasons. Federal, usually the funding periods and trajectory is a little bit longer, sometimes 3 to 5 years and beyond. Oftentimes the funding amounts that they award are much larger than what you would be able to see from a corporate or a foundation sponsor. And the prestige that goes along with those as being an R1 university, those are the kinds of opportunities we're going to gravitate towards. However, the downside of that, and again, this is education generally across the board, is when we encounter times of fiscal strain, whether it is like the Great Recession in 2008 to 2010 and 11, where the economy was struggling. And so there was less monies available because the federal government was having to redirect the funds in other ways to help the country weather that challenging financial period. So looking at a diverse portfolio helps so that you're not as reliant on one area if there's one sector that is struggling. One thing that we find that's particularly beneficial with corporate and foundation funding is they will oftentimes fund higher risk projects, something that's new, something that's untested. And so you may have the opportunity to secure funding from a corporation or a foundation that a federal agency wouldn't have considered funding. Working with a corporation or a foundation can also be less bureaucratic. I would say most of the time. Sometimes you have, I would say, particularly foundations that have can be onerous expectations, but for the most part, as a general rule, corporations and foundations are less bureaucratic. They are much more relationship driven, and so that is why our office spends a lot of time trying to connect with corporate and foundation representatives so that we're building the relationship with Emory. There's certainly lots of RFPs, and Hazel will talk about how we disseminate information in the RFPs that we release from our office. But in addition to those RFPs, we really do try to focus on cultivating the relationships that are going to lead to those really more transformational opportunities that are outside RFPs. Next slide. So just some differences with corporations and foundations to keep in mind. With our corporations, oftentimes what they choose to support is tied to stakeholders. And so, this is why for our office, it's really important for us to stay closely connected to the corporations that are our partners, because sometimes the winds shift and change, and a corporation wants to go in a different direction because of priorities of their shareholders. Brand visibility can be something that's important. Some corporations, some are very humble, and it's not necessarily always a priority for them. But the overall brand visibility and having their brand tied to whether it be in a very public way or in a quiet, more in the background kind of way is really important, that it's tied to another strong brand. So Emory's reputation is important as we're talking to corporations and they think about providing support to us. For both corporations and foundations, the timeline can be a bit longer. And so that relationship development piece is so incredibly important. In most instances, you see that the cultivation timeline is going to be, I would say, on average of about 18 months. Some will have a little shorter runway of about a year. Some can be as long as 3 years before you will see funding come to fruition. Engagement for corporations can come in a number of forms and fashions. I led with earlier in the presentation things like internships, experiential learning opportunities, sponsorships, and then hopefully potentially hiring our students. For foundations, the awards, it's going to be very traditional, what you would expect. It could be a grant or the form of a gift, and our office can help you ascertain which it is, because the processing is going to look different dependent upon whether it is a grant or whether it's a gift. And the awards, again, like probably all of you are very familiar with, working with governmental funding, there are going to be reporting requirements, terms, and conditions that are going to be associated. Next slide. So diverse portfolios, all the things that I have mentioned previously. And so one of the things that we have been sharing with people just to help manage expectations, if this is your first time beginning to think about applying for funding from a corporation or foundation, we are seeing today that there is much, much more competition for grants. Anyone who is a baseball fan, you know that if you're batting 300, right, you're great. You have a really good batting average. Well, it's about the same thing with grants, with grant seeking. If you're hitting about a 30% return rate, you're a really good, strong grant writer. And what we are finding with corporations and foundations, and there's one that I worked with earlier this summer that has a regular annual grant program where they typically expect to receive about 100 grant applications for a cycle. And in the last 6 months, they have seen their numbers of submissions triple. So whereas before, we had one application from Emory that was competing with 99 other applicants. They're now competing with triple the number of other applicants. So what that means is that you're going to have to write more grants to get the same kind of return that you would have had to get a year ago. So we just wanted to let everyone know that. But we always see grant writing and the submissions and development of proposals to be a value added effort. While it may be a proposal doesn't get funded in this instance, it's always information that you can use for a later submission. Looking at some Emory specific information, we wanted to share in the last few years what we are tracking like across the organization. And so we took just a snapshot from the spring. We're still getting all of our final numbers settling for the end of the fiscal year. So we took a point in the spring and just to do some benchmarking for ourselves. And so you can see with corporate funding, there's a little bit of ebb and flow. We have been on an increasing trajectory with foundation support. Other organizations, religious organizations, again, a little bit of an uptick in some of those areas. And then overall, we've been remaining pretty consistent. Let's see, pretty consistent. So around 155 million at this point in April of each year across corporations and foundations. Some examples of some new organizations to Emory. These are organizations that we have been working to develop relationships with. So some of these names may be familiar for you, some may be new to you. But this is the kind of work that we're doing in our office. And so we're always happy too, as well, to hear from faculty who may know of a new organization that isn't one that has necessarily been connected with Emory, and we can help be a partner in cultivating that relationship. And so what I would like to do now is turn things over to my colleague, Hazel Kim. Hazel has been with Emory's Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations since 2021. She's been in a number of progressively responsible roles. And again, I'm so thrilled to share the news that she is now our new Managing Senior Director, who will be working really closely with School of Medicine, Department of Medicine, and working across the healthcare side. So let me turn things over to Hazel to continue the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Angie. I am going to get a little bit more granular in a lot of the questions and in a lot of the conversations that I end up having, particularly with faculty in the health sciences when they're seeking private funding. And one thing that I always will lead with is that corporations and foundations are like toddlers or teenagers, depending on what stage of life you're in, and they are very me focused. They are all about themselves. And while NIH, NSF might be really into what is good science, corporations and foundations are just really about how is this going to help my goals and the impact that I am trying to accomplish here. So again, really just going back to their priorities. So one of the things that we have, and I can drop the link into the chat at the end here, is that we do have an internal resource, which is our SharePoint page, and it is available to anybody with an Emory or Emory Healthcare email address. And I would love to say that this was a really fancy technical tool, but it is essentially a table or a list on a SharePoint page. But what it lacks in bells and whistles and AI, it is just very usable. And I like to think of it as a modern day bulletin board. If you were going to walk by a bulletin board and just kind of see what's out there and what's new, that's what this is. So rather than spend time in programming fancy features, we really try to spend a lot of time just going out and researching what are the corporate and foundation funding opportunities that we can share with our community that might be a good fit with some of the work that we know that is happening within our labs and schools. So, what we do is once a week, this gets updated, and we also have a listserv that we send out an email every Tuesday afternoon that lets you know these are things that are new that have been added to our SharePoint list. And also, here are some upcoming deadlines that we are going to gently remind you about. And then we also have a contact person within our office that is somebody that you can reach out to with just questions on, I'd like to know more, or I'd like to submit an LOI. How do I get started? And then to be helpful, we try to really call out eligibility requirements if there are some, funding range, so that you know just at a glance whether this is something you might be interested in pursuing. So definitely invite you to take a look at that on a regular basis and reach out with questions. Um, and then we also do help with some limited submissions. So I'm guessing a lot of you are already familiar with InfoReady, where a lot of the internal funding opportunities get posted, as well as some of the federal grant opportunities. But for the private limited submissions, oftentimes we are, as an institution, only allowed to submit one or two or possibly three. So we have to do an internal competition to essentially engage a review committee to determine who Emory's nominee is going to be to submit. And then we also have some foundation and corporate relationships that are managed through advancement and alumni engagement. And I won't go too much into the details, but I think based on some of the names that you see on the screen, these are just relationships that are managed by people way above my pay grade and pay scale. And so we just help to try to navigate those and make sure that those go well. So I'm going to just run through a couple of examples of some things that are unique to give you an idea and a little flavor of why some things get managed through our office. The Keck Foundation is a very prestigious award, and we have gotten three in the history that I know of. One to the School of Medicine back in 2014, and a couple of the past couple of years in the College to Physics. It's not huge money. It's between $1 and $1.5 million, but they are very, very particular in that they only want communication from one designated liaison from Emory University, and they get pretty prickly if they get contacted outside of that institutional liaison. Because of that, we have a designated person in our office that is not me, but I'm happy to connect you to, that is the institutional liaison. And when things go awry, they like to email us and also drop in an email to the president's office about if they're unhappy about something. So we definitely encourage you to contact us. But going back to the foundations willing to fund higher risk things, they are very interested in high risk ideas. Some of the surprising things we get are, I had this crazy idea. I can't believe they're interested in funding it. So if you have a crazy idea, come talk to me. But also, too, on the other side of it, they will throw out an entire application if the margins are wrong or if the font is wrong. So that's the other thing that I can't believe they did this too. And then the Coca-Cola Foundation is, of course, just an institution, especially in Georgia. Because they get approached so much, they also are very, very clear that they want to get requests through one single source, which has been determined to be our office. So several times a year, they will contact us and say, this lovely person reached out to us from Emory. Please talk to them and have them go through your office. So please maybe just save a step. And if you have interest in talking to Coca-Cola Foundation or learning more, Angie is a great resource. I will say that their focus is probably not something that's going to fall necessarily as a natural fit with medicine because they've been very interested in undergrad scholarships previously. But things like business considerations, for a long time, they were insistent they could not talk to us about proposals because they were in the middle of negotiating pouring rights with the university. Okay. So I'm going to jump into some very practical advice um, because these are things that I feel like can maybe help just with successful proposal submissions and just issues. They're sort of my FAQs. Going back to organizations being very, very self-serving and mission-focused, I want to bring up something that was taught to me in my first fundraising training several decades ago that has always stuck with me. And the person talked about always employing the platinum rule. And I think we're all familiar with the golden rule of treat others the way that you would want to be treated. And the platinum rule goes one above that to be more valuable than the golden rule and treat others as they want to be treated. So the example that I use is that I love to read and I love to shop. So a great gift for me would be a gift card to a bookstore. My husband hates to shop and he does not read. So if I was going to employ the golden rule, I would get him a gift card to a bookstore and he would be very, very disappointed. So I want to be treating others the way that they want to be treated, not the way I want to be treated. So you need to think about your proposals to corporates and foundations in the same way. Your science and your aims might be unbelievably important to you and the world. But what is important to that corporation? What is important to that foundation? And that's what we need to use as our true compass. Also, too, every foundation and corporation, their RFP is incredibly unique, and they like to throw in small print that can really kind of throw us off course. So I very much encourage if they have taken the trouble to write a 7-page RFP, we need to be reading every single word of that. And by all means, leverage us, your RAS partners, whoever you are working with to help with that. And definitely, and I've seen this happen multiple times before, there are deadlines. Just always check the time and the time zone of the submission deadline. Also, too, once you look at a deadline, I think folks in here probably have experience with this, but I like to assume that everything is going to take twice as long as it should, in my mind, and work that into a timeline when trying to get all of our ducks in a row for proposal submission, particularly with portals. If they say it's closing, it's closed. And then also too, I see this a lot is that every proposal application is going to ask different questions. And so taking a previous proposal that maybe was submitted to a federal agency and copying and pasting is generally not going to work because it's not apples to apples. So we need to be reading every question and responding with something that is actually answering that question. And a lot of times, what I see sort of the mismatch on this is that proposals, particularly with foundations, want to know what is the impact that your work is having. And so sometimes it's really working with folks to say your science is wonderful, and I see how these aims are really going to, come into clear focus. But what does that mean in terms of social impact? Does your trial result in lower death rates, less appointments, children spending less time in the hospital? What is this meaning truly for the impact that the foundation is looking for? And also, too, I think that it is safe to assume that the readers of these proposals are going to be educated, but it is almost certain that they are not going to be an expert in your field. So a lot of times it's very clear to you that what you're proposing is first in field and a total paradigm shift, but it may not be obvious to the reader how exciting and new that is because they don't know what the baseline is of previous treatments or previous expected outcomes. So really calling that out can be very helpful in making a proposal stronger. And then also too, we have found that a lot of times a Zoom meeting, face-to-face meetings are more rare these days, but a meeting can go just exponentially far in terms of having an advocate in the room when committees are reviewing proposals. I have seen a lot of misunderstandings or not quite understanding the science, but then you get into a Zoom call with them and they leave the Zoom meeting just super excited and ready to just be a big champion for your proposal in those committee meetings. So that is often something that I am completely willing to do is just reach out and ask, is a meeting possible? Is some feedback possible? Sometimes the answer is no, but sometimes the answer is yes. So when appropriate, I think there are a lot of times to try to get some additional feedback. And I also too know that a lot of times corporations, foundations are sending officers, scientific officers, program officers to these scientific meetings and conferences. So please, please, please strike up the conversations when you are there. It is a lot of times where invitation only proposals um, get started. It is often where somebody will talk to a scientist at a conference meeting and then go back to their organization and say, we have to work with this person. And then they will actually reach out to us to get a conversation started. So with that, great. So we are at 12:45, so maybe we can open it up to questions.
Thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Angie. This is wonderful, really. So let me first open up to our participants for questions because I have some questions, but I want to first give everybody an opportunity. So please unmute your mic, raise your hand, whatever feels more comfortable, put in a comment. Okay, while we wait for responses, Paul, you unmuted.
Yeah, hey, thanks to everybody for the presentations. If there is an area that we're particularly interested in, say, for non-human primate studies for immune therapies, is that something that we could derive from the databases, or what? Basically, how can we be more proactive other than searching these databases and in looking for industry-sponsored research?
I would say first off, I would love to sit down and schedule a Zoom meeting because I think the nuances of what they're looking for and sometimes finding the match with what you're doing is not always very, very obvious when you're scrolling through and looking at the funding opportunities. Um, but a lot of times we are able to kind of find niches and matches that aren't obvious just by having a deeper conversation. And, I mentioned that, we announce new opportunities every Tuesday. And then the fundraisers on our team that work in health sciences also sit down every Tuesday to go over everything that's been new and have a discussion about it. And we very much see ourselves as matchmakers. So it feels like a bunch of aunties that just met a bunch of eligible new bachelors, and we all sit down and talk about, like, what single girls we know that we can possibly match them up with. But a lot of it kind of happens in those kind of conversations of, oh, now that I understand what this foundation is looking for, it's not obvious, but it might be a good fit for dot, 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 who is doing work in dot, dot, dot. So it doesn't necessarily happen right away, but a lot of times, a lot of, time that Ashley, Tom, myself, Angie, we are meeting with faculty to learn more about the work, what they're looking for, so that we can find those matches.
Okay. I'll follow up, Hazel, and we'll see if we can find a time to talk next week. I guess the reverse of that would be, there's a database that we have to look through corporate opportunities. Is there a searchable database for corporations or biotechs to look at capabilities that Emory has to sort of industry forward facing research opportunities or collaborations at Emory? Do you have the reverse?
Yeah, I don't believe so. And that is something, Paul, I know in our office, we are trying to create even just a tool for ourselves, like when Hazel has a meeting with you and captures detail around where your areas of research interest and expertise are. We're trying to create a system ourselves where we can keep track of that kind of information. So when a funding opportunity comes along, that we're able to do these kinds of matches. But anything that is available externally, and I think that's what you're asking for, that a corporation who comes, would they be able to go online to find something like that? No, there is not a resource like that. Oftentimes, what ends up happening is they connect to someone within the school unit department, and they may get them directed to our office, and then we try to help make those connections directly.
So I think that's a really great point Paul brings up, Angie and Hazel, because I am thinking, we if we had something like that. So, for example, I just started my example. I do lung transplant research, right? So, if we had something which was forward facing to say, you know, fibrosis, pulmonary fibrosis research, what's happening at Emory or lung transplant research, to Paul's point, we have obviously Paul deals with primate, but we have these mouse models of transplant, which occasionally corporations come to me because they are some of the best models and they want us to use their models. Now, it's not always that works out because I want it as a collaboration and a science that is going both ways. I'm not going to do something which is not in my scientific arena because that takes away from my science. But sometimes it's a perfect match. So if we had a forward-facing thing like that, I know they were doing something like that at Michigan. I don't know if they have something. Definitely, they were doing something like that when I left.
Yeah, I keep saying that I would love to build something that is kind of like a Wikipedia of faculty and their work here that was
Yeah.
searchable and real-time editable. Like it needs to be like a Wikipedia merged with a match.com would sort of be the ideal situation. But yeah, I don't know of anything that does exist.
Thanks to both of you.
But I think to your point, everyone, I must say that we all get in our comfort zone. NIH is in our comfort zone. We know how to write R01s. And then, we all I have some foundations which go after, like, every division has cardiology, Charlie, they have AHA, we have chest foundation, cystic fibrosis foundation.
Mhm.
We don't go beyond that, right? Like I sometimes see opportunities which seem like that might fit. I've never heard of that foundation before. I've never applied to that before. So
Yeah.
maybe we all need to get out of our comfort zone a little bit. And, when we see those opportunities, maybe contact you all to see if that fit seems like the right fit. And if, because it is work, anytime you write a grant, it takes a lot out of you. So you want to apply in the right area, all that effort. So I think this might be a good, a sort of a initiative for us to take in internal medicine. Like you said, Angie, we have to apply for much more to get funding right now, especially with where even the pay lines for NIH are, look at where those pay lines are. So I think we might have to sort of build in some incentives for taking initiative to go beyond where we normally our comfort zone lies.
Well, we're seeing even with some foundations, and we have a couple of recent examples where just like at the federal level, they have received a foundation had received so much interest that they decided to suspend this year's competition and just fund down the slate from an earlier competition in the year. And so I know of one faculty, I was quite disappointed. They got turned down in the first round, and now theirs is actually being considered for funding. So, we have some things like that that are happening, but if you don't apply, you're not you're not in the running for those opportunities. So certainly recognize how much everyone has on their plate. So you always have to think about that return on investment. And that's something we encourage you to think about, when you look at a funding opportunity, if it's $75,000, but you really need 100 to carry out your effort, it may not be one that you want to apply for. So we always encourage everyone to take a look at the funding, take a look at the reporting requirements. So, as Hazel said, it's going to take you twice as much time to complete the application than probably you anticipate that it's going to. And you all know this very well with your past grant work. The implementation is going to take twice the amount of effort that the putting the proposal in. And so if you have a foundation that has a completely onerous expectation in terms of reporting requirements, that may be something that you want to reconsider. We have one grant that was funded a few months ago. It was something that was very, very niche. It was an area where there isn't often funding opportunities. It was only $25,000, and this foundation requires reporting 8 times a year. The department decided that because they have such few opportunities, they were willing to go forward with it so that they could get some additional resources to their department. So there are a lot of things like that, and we always like to have those conversations with you when there are things from our perspective that are a bit of a red flag. Is this really going to be best use of your time? Is this going to give you the resources you need? So while we
I'll
always encourage you to think about other opportunities, to also keep that into consideration.
I'll throw into that too. I think it's important for this group, for School of Medicine and the Primate Center. Foundation and directs are usually very low.
Yeah.
So usually 0 to 10%, which causes an issue. I think the appetite or the tolerance for that has certainly gone up since the NIH rates have been under discussion at a federal level. But yes, more work, less indirect rates.
But corporations, their indirects are okay, right?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
So I have, even with Merck recently, if it is something where they are getting something in return, they may have a lot better appetite for paying full indirects. This was something that was earlier than that, and they made it very clear that 30% was acceptable, but anything close to 50% was absolutely not acceptable at all. So they were really balking at anything close to 50%.
This is a much broader topic of conversation, but I'll just briefly comment. I mean, one is with foundations, we have established, so particularly with the Gates Foundation, a different level of direct costs for
Yes,
foundations that they've accepted that largely offsets the difference in indirect costs.
yes,
And
absolutely.
they've been fine with that. They've also been fine with including support for administrators under some larger Gates grants. Again, something that you wouldn't
Yes,
normally be able to do on most NIH grants, but Gates allows.
yes. And I
Um,
think
and,
go ahead, sorry.
and again, I think in terms of marketing, we need to think of total costs, and I think it's much better to be talking with industry in terms of total costs and not having them then breaking down things about indirect costs, particularly is the indirect cost formula that we've been operating in may be different a year from now.
It's a
And
great point because it's
so,
it's language, right? Like indirect costs is not a word that exists for corporate and foundation. So to them, it just sounds like tax.
and
So
so if we
they've,
yeah, if we start the conversation with direct costs and then say, hey, by the way, if we start with total costs, it's a much easier conversation.
yes,
And I think we
Absolutely.
need to educate our investigators because that's not the way they usually think.
right.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, you are here and you mentioned about Merck there in your comment. Um, and I want to take an opportunity because Lindsay heads our RASH unit. And as we, try to get more of these foundation awards, Lindsay, like, do you see a challenge in supporting some of these awards as this corporate, like it's different, like NIH pre-post award knows exactly what to do. We talked a little bit about CF Foundation just as, sideline, but do you see some more opportunity for education or for us to get, or is the liaison already there between you and Angie's office? And
Somewhat. I think I've talked to Hazel probably most and not that often, but we've definitely engaged on some topics. I think all of this is great. I agree with the mission and that we need to bring in a more diverse portfolio. I agree with all of that. The one plug I will say is we run into a lot of situations where the faculty are working on these things with the sponsors directly, working with your group. They're getting all of that support. Then they get an award and nothing ever routed through RAS. And we then are trying to route after the fact. And the struggle with that is that we don't want to negate all the hard work you all put in, because I know you worked really hard with the faculty worked really hard, those conversations with the sponsors were happening. However, if the sponsor limits overhead to 0, 10%, or honestly limits overhead at all, and it's not a published policy. So either it's in the solicitation and that's like out on a website that we can get to, or it's just out on their website that this organization pays this rate. If it's not published, we then have to do an F&A waiver. So at that point, you've got an award typically in hand, and we're at a stage where we may have to decline that award. And we don't want the faculty to be in that situation. We don't want any of these teams to be in that situation. But I think it's really important that our offices partner, and that if it's something that RAS is going to have to manage on the post-award end, prior to it being submitted, engaging us, making sure we're routing, making sure we get those F&A waivers, because I think there's great justifications for these sometimes. But I will say the tolerance is lower whenever it didn't route through RAS to begin with. So that's just something to throw out there.
I completely agree. The ideal situation for us is when a faculty starts with us is our first question back to them is, have you done your intent to submit? Have you engaged RAS?
Yeah.
Let's get them involved right away. And it doesn't always happen, the ideal timeline and process, but yes, I completely agree and hear you.
And I think,
And Lindsay, we have the same issue on our side. Sometimes they come directly working with you, and then we are not in the loop about it until after it's been awarded. And so there may be things on our end too as well that we're navigating. So we do try to stay in close communication with each other. So it's always great to partner with you. It just makes the process go more smoothly for everyone. And we're always of the belief that the more proactive we can be on the front end, then when the award comes in, it's going to make implementation go all that much smoother.
and I do believe that, we have work to do in improving some of the processes and then putting it out there for make it easier. I always talk about the ease of research. It's the last ease of research. So I want to bring up our mission really was to remove micro hurdles from the path of the investigators and to streamline the path so that it becomes easy for them. And I think there's a little bit of work which we still might have to do on the process, but I must say that I recently had a corporate award and the Office of Technology Transfer. I went directly to Lindsay. Lindsay helped me with the budget and everything. And it wasn't easy because I didn't know how to go about it at Emory. And then the Office of Technology Transfer was just amazing. They got it done so quickly that I had to actually email them 10 times to tell them how appreciative I was. I wanted them to know that because I kept telling the corporation it was a big award, and I kept telling them, I think it will take us 3-4 months to get this published. It was done in a couple of weeks. So I think we have good things going, and we just have to work a little more on these processes so that it's easy and this ease of research continues. With that, I think it's 1:00, 1:02. I want to close the session. This is our last Ease of Research seminar for the year. So I want to thank Kanika. Kanika's been behind all this, and she's the force which makes this happen. Thank you. And my co-partner in this, Charlie, you turned off your mic thing there. And this is it for us for 2025, and we will reconvene in 2026. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Angie, Hazel, and Ashley, and Tom was here. And thank you for all of you for joining.
Thank you for the
Bye-bye.
invite.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.